Hey there, everyone, and welcome back to another video. Today, I want to share with you some insights about the sign of Cancer. Cancer, in my opinion, is probably one of the more misunderstood signs of the zodiac. Reason being, we're often reduced to being little more than domestic crybabies. Maybe that's the reason why I confess I'm not a fan of being a Cancer. Maybe there's an element of truth to some of those misconceptions. But anyway, that's what I want to do, is to give you a little bit more of a philosophical perspective on the sign of Cancer, give you a little bit more of a fundamental and spiritual meaning to the sign of Cancer. And so you can tour this season with a little bit more of an introspective look at some of the really unique features of what the sign of Cancer brings, not to just Cancerians, but to us all. Because even if you're not a Cancer or you don't have planets in Cancer, as I'm sure most of you all do know, that you will have an area of life that is ruled by the sign of Cancer. So there may be a little corner of your life, large or small, where the energy that we'll be talking about in this video really resonates. So before I get there, I'd also just like to make a very quick announcement. I am putting together the Golden Circle for July. So if you're curious about the astrology of July and do enjoy some more deeper takes on the astrology, that is the place to get them. The Golden Circle is a series of videos that's released each and every month, plus various resources, new moon chats, community conversation, and it's a whole lot of fun. So that's my favorite little corner on the internet. So if you'd like to join the Golden Circle and get inside that, I'll put a link in the description below where you can find out more about it. So as I've already hinted, I'm not fond of being a Cancer. I'm going to be honest. I don't like the moodiness, the sappiness, and sort of the domesticated qualities that we do have. But probably what annoys me the most is how we are reduced to that. So, as I mentioned already, a deeper perspective is what I'm going to attempt to bring in the next several minutes. So, for those who are not astrologically ordained, the word Cancer does already bring a negative connotation to what the sign means. If you are a Cancer, I'm sure you've received the, "Ooh, are you a disease?" Like, whatever. But the reason why the illness Cancer has got that name is due to microscopically the cells of the Cancer cells are quite reminiscent of the crab. Hence why the name Cancer for the illness and Cancer for the sign are the same. So it is a little bit unfortunate, to be honest, but in some ways that in of itself does create a very unique paradox, because as we break down the essence of Cancer, which is life, Cancer as an illness, unfortunately, can also be the harbinger of death. And so, Cancer is the ultimate sign of the waxes and the wanes and the rises of the falls of all cycles of life. So, crabs as a animal are exoskeletal creatures. And so, when we think about the crab and its skeleton, these exoskeletal creatures, when they grow, they need to go through this very painful process of, okay, it's time to grow bigger, and now I need to crack open my exoskeleton and break outside its own bones, literally, and regrow and then grow another shell, and in order to grow again. And so the crab will do this over several cycles a year. And then, of course, as the crab ages, those cycles become a little less frequent. And the idea of this is that the crab can't stay inside its shell forever. If it does, it will die. Simple. Same as a snake shedding skin. If it doesn't shed that skin, it will die. And so this also reminds us that growth, that change is a very painful yet necessary process. It's extremely uncomfortable. So we do have cycles of pain, physical pain through growth, especially when we're children. I'll never forget when my son first showed signs of teething, literally growing his, a bone formation, the idea of having all these teeth embedded into the jaw, and you get to a certain age and they start to shift and break through the gums. I mean, if you've been through the process of a baby teething, it is gruesome. It's so horrible. So we have that. And I recall as a kid myself, I used to suffer a lot, having growing pains through the night. So we do all experience the physical crab-like phases of growth and renewal. But of course, we also have the emotional ones. And those are the ones that, it's not quite as easy just to pop a Panadol and fix. Panadol is the Australian version of Tylenol, in case you're not sure what I mean there. So Cancer is a water sign. So it is going to point to the idea of emotions. And it is the emotional pain of change and of growth, which, especially as adults, can be the hardest to push through, the hardest to work through. And these things come through as cycles. We go through one process of emotional growth. We think, great, we're done. And then we go through other parts of our lives, other phases of life where it's like, damn, this old chestnut, we're back here again. So there's a lot of reasons for that. And we'll come back to some of those. And of course, as adults, we will have our own versions of painkillers that we might like to employ in order to reduce the pain or the feelings of having to grow or push outside of a mental or an emotional shell that we use to protect ourselves. Alcohol, drugs, avoidance, denial, a certain sort of stubbornness where you just draw into the shell and refuse to grow or change. It can be moodiness. It can be the passive aggressive energy that is often ascribed to Cancer. So we all have our little vices where when we are feeling that at some emotional level we've reached our edge and the shell is starting to crack, that's that pivotal point in time where you get to choose, do you reach for the painkiller, whichever way, shape, or form that takes? Or do you sit in that meantime? Do you sit in that stillness of the void that happens in between the periods of growth? And this is the interesting part about Cancer, which often is rarely spoken about in the astrological zeitgeist. So if you do reach for those triggers, and I have mine, I'm going to admit I'm fond of a wine, or scotch. I mean, I love my scotch. So so you can reach for that. For other people, they'll have their own things, but we all need our pacifiers in life. There's nothing wrong with that. But there is that awareness of, okay, I'm reaching for this thing, I'm in a growth process, and being able to sit in that discomfort, sit with the pain, literal, metaphorical, of what it feels like to emerge from the shell, to crack it right open. So you can grow a little bit. And then, yes, you grow and then build that shell and get comfortable again until you then reach another edge and you go through that process again. In life, the essence of Cancer, we never stop doing that. Cancers spiral in and then they spiral out. That's the essence of the shell, the discomfort, the pain, the void, the stagnation, as that shell starts to crack. And it's scary, it's painful, we we don't like it, but we know it's also necessary. And so we go through that process, and then we regrow the shell. We start to get a new level of comfort, of safety, of warmth and security. And then another situation arises and we go through that process again. So this is the constant, the ebb and the flow, the waxing and the waning that is very much tied to the idea of Cancer being ruled by the moon. It makes a lot of sense. So one thing with Cancer is its inconsistencies. It's a thing. And so it's really helpful to realize, and this is something that's been so helpful for me, is that we're at least consistent in our inconsistencies. And that's the moon. The moon, out of all of the planets, has the most fluctuating of all the cycles. But those fluctuations, in of themselves, are regular, rhythmic, and they're not without their greater purpose or their greater representation of what it's trying to show or reveal to us. So, when we're talking about the idea of growth, and growth is very much a Cancerian essence, growth is very stressful. There's nothing about growth that usually comes with ease, with flow. In an ideal situation, yes, it would. But in essence, in order to do something we've never done, in order to get something we've never had, we have to put ourselves out on a limb. We have to put ourselves out on that rock, like the proverbial crab at the beach, protected under the rock in its shell. And then it decides, I need to get some food, or I need to go and mate, or I need to do whatever crabs do in their natural habitat. And they have to emerge from that rock. Maybe they need to sun themselves on the top of the rock for a while, or maybe they need to scurry along and get into the water. And in the process of getting whatever need is required to be met, they really do put themselves in a vulnerable position. They can be swooped up by a wave, they can be swooped by a seagull or some other kind of bird or prey. So, growth and risk is very much a Cancerian thing. The idea of the discomfort and the disruption of having to get outside the shell, put yourself out on a ledge or out on a rock, or also the idea of being on the dry land, the sand, and then, of course, being in the water. So, that's a very transitional life the crab has, which is very reflective of the transitions of the moon, the transitions of life, the transitions of growth, and the transitions of change that we all experience one way or another. So, the idea of transition is not just, okay, well, I'm at point A and I'm going to go to point B and boom, I'm there and everything's great. It would be wonderful sometimes if things were just so linear. When we're talking Cancer, we're talking almost anti-linear. So there is a lot of void in transitions, and the void is that meantime, the meantime between the here and the there. The process of breaking through a shell and regrowing it is not instantaneous. It's a little bit like the butterfly and the chrysalis. It's a season of cocoonment before those wings emerge. So it's not a point A to point B. It's kind of a messiness, and it's the void. It's the holding pattern. It is the waiting to grow those wings proverbially and fly is the most tricky. When we can understand the void that comes with transformation, that is that point where we may choose to not lean on those crutches or those various comforts that may pacify us to a point, but they don't do us a disservice. So imagine the crab is like, oh, I'm not really enjoying the process, this painful process of regrowing my shell. So I am going to just, pop that pill or take that drink or whatever the thing is to numb the pain. it would not it wouldn't do its due process. And so in our culture and in our society, we're very pain avoidant. Got a headache, pop a pill. Got a sore hip, pop a pill. Like that's sort of, not saying that that's what I do, because I'll avoid taking anything if I can. But that's how we're bred. It's how we're geared to behave. And so we're a little bit anti-process. We're a little bit anti-void. We're a little bit anti-transition. We want the end result, but we don't want to do the process. So when we can understand that, when we can understand that the true growth, the beauty of the unfoldment is something to be embraced and to understand, we can perhaps get a little bit more of an appreciation for the journey of breaking through one's shell. So I've taken a lot of notes for you today. So just flipping the page. And so the crab itself is such a wonderful emblem for the sign of Cancer. It flows in and out into different terrains. It moves with the ebb and flow of the tides and represents those rises and falls. So there is pain in all of these cycles. And whether we are in the comfort of the known, the comfort of the shell that we already have, and we're thinking everything's great, that can also be a blessing and a curse. There's pain in stagnant energy as much as there is in the void and as there is in the transition. So the pain of these cycles can be a blessing, because the pain is what tells us that something's wrong, that something is not right. I know a couple of years ago, my son was having some dental issues, and he's crying about the pain and why does it have to hurt so much? And I said, imagine if you didn't feel pain at all, you wouldn't know that something was wrong with your tooth. So when we can understand that pain's just a warning that something's wrong, whether that's physical or emotional, it shows us that somewhere, some way, or somehow we are needing to crack through a shell, upskill, up level. We need to grow, transition, and change in some ways. The paradox of birth, for instance, when we crack open that shell, we're birthing a new cycle of ourselves, a new shell, a new home, a new exoskeleton rather. The paradox of birth in itself is almost like the baby coming out of the womb, cracking out of the shell, this encasing that it's been very comfortable and very familiar in. And then the birthing process is very emblematic of the crab cracking through its own shell. It's scary, it's painful for both mother and child, and a beautiful thing actually emerges from something that's, full of blood and pain. So the child experiences its first emerging into a new shell, into its new body through the cycle of birth. So it's no doubt, it's no no confusion as to why Cancer is the cosmos's great mother, because the mother, the birthing, the incubation, the pain, and the beauty is all emblematic of the cycle of birth. The sign of Cancer is also ruled by the moon, of course, which you will all know. And the moon doesn't have any light of its own. It reflects the light of the sun, while the moon receives the light of the sun. It's not a mirror. And so the moon has its own way of being. It's very mysterious. It's a very muse. It's the source of wonder and source of a muse for eternity, really. I often think of romantic walks in the moonlight. It's not so much romantic walks in the height of the summer sun. So there is something that's very admirable about the energy of Cancer, the silver circle, the light that's hers, but it's not hers at the same time. It's a very interesting energy. And the moon and Cancer has a real pulling power. It really draws in. It draws in, it waxes and it grows, and then it wanes and it releases and gives back. And so this cycle of life, birth, death, renewal, waxes and wanes, and all of those types of analogies, it really is representative of the circle of life and the Great Mother. So, the idea of the Great Mother, we can also bring in the idea of the sentimentality. I'm a sentimental soul, I'm going to admit, and that's probably one area where my own Cancerianness comes through a lot. Because why we will sometimes reluctantly break through a shell and regrow a new one, we're also still aware of what's been left behind. We can move into new phases and to new cycles of our life, but like the moon, we also have the capacity to reflect on the light of the past and carry that with us. It's also got to do with those embryonic waters, the waters of Cancer. Water is a memory holder. And so there's a lot of sentimentality that comes with Cancer. There's also sensitivity, the understanding of the cycles, the receptivity of the cycles, and understanding that there's a season for everything. And like the moon, there's a season to grow and there's a season to not grow. There's a season to be full and ripe, and there's a season to incubate and to hibernate. If you're familiar with the secondary progressed lunar phase cycle in particular, you will get a really deep understanding of how life cycles work under the phases of the moon. I do have a workshop on my website, Predicting by the Light of the Moon. And while there are other timing techniques that are extremely popular in astrology, zodiacal releasing, for example, gets a lot of fame. Honestly, hands down, without question, to time the season of life, the lunar phase, hands down, wins every time. It seems very simple, very rudimentary, but the moon is where it's at as far as timing goes. So there is a season for everything under the sun, as they say in the Bible, but the moon is also a part of that relationship. Cancer is also the sign of summer, and maybe that's why I feel I was born in the wrong hemisphere. I feel like I should be enjoying the height of summer, not winter. Summer is the season of warmth and expansion. Just drinking from my mum cup here. Expansion. And when we have the conditions of summer, of warmth, of light and moisture in the air, not a hot, dry summer, but more of a hot and wet summer, we emerge from the shell. We emerge from our homes that might be cold. We become more social. We become more outgoing. We'll have barbecues, trip to the beach. We might be more active outside, longer days, and of course, daylight savings if that's something that that you have where you live. So the height of summer is the agitation of the waters within us, the waters of nature. It's the antithesis of the cold, restrictive, and incubating nature of Capricorn, where you might be got the heater turned right up inside, whereas the energy of Cancer and the beginning, the agitation, the early phases, the cardinal phases of summer, it's like, oh, great, we've got longer days, the temperatures are higher, and there's more agitation and desire to grow, to expand, to break out of a certain kind of shell. And so Cancer really does remind us of growth, which is not something that is often attributed to the sign. It's very, very fecund. I mean, it's usually boobs and belly is all Cancer, which are the givers of life. And Cancer has got that abundance to it as the giver of life. However, these things can only happen usually when that shell breaks. And so the cardinal nature of Cancer is that change, that agitation. And that agitation can often be the emotional changes. Obviously, there's the physical components of Cancer, pregnancy, birth, the symbolism in nature. But there's also the changes within, the emotional changes, the life changes, the seasonal changes that happen within us as well. They will agitate and change. Cancer is the sign of life, or high. The Hebrew word for life is high. So Cancer is very much about life. And then, of course, the other version of cancer, the illness, can often result in death, which is the unfortunate part of that. So, and it's also Cancer is the sign of which Jupiter finds its exaltation. So it really, really does represent the idea of life. So instead, as we move into this Cancer season of thinking about domestication, cups of tea, and naps and granny blankets, which is what happens. We're more than just, housewives and domesticated goddesses, although we can be that too. Cancer are the great mothers, the great givers of life, the great givers of comfort, of care, and of life. So celebrate yourself, celebrate the others around you during this Cancer season. So think of Cancer and the next 4 weeks of the great incubator of something that you would like to change, something that you'd like to give birth to, proverbially, or maybe literally, in your life. Think of the idea of high, the idea of life and growth and progress and of change. And also understand that growth and life and change does rise and it does fall, just like the moon and that the tides that she rules. So I do hope that this has given you a little bit more of a little deeper insight into the sign of Cancer. Moving forward, I really do think that if we can incorporate some of these ideas into the next 4 weeks as the sun moves into or through Cancer rather, this might help us gain a little bit more of a spiritual or a guiding post of how to handle Mars in Cancer later this year, and then the retrograde that will permeate the first part of 2025. But there will be a blessing, as there always is with Cancer, in terms of the void, that void of change, that void of between the place you are now and the place you need to go is that void. And in some ways, I think Mars in Cancer, the retrograde, may be that itchy, scratchy period. But then there's blessings once that shell cracks open and new growth can take place. And that's what we're going to experience in about a year's time when Jupiter will be in Cancer. So there's a lot of Cancer to come. And I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did like it, leave me a comment, share, subscribe if you haven't already. And I really look forward to seeing you in the next video, which will be the horoscopes for next week. All right, bye for now.